We're here today with Colin Tamplin, who's been a minister at a church in Birmingham for about the last 23 years, Colin. And so it's great to have you, Colin, today. Perhaps just start by telling us a little bit about how it feels to have spent 23 years in the same place, in the same job.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great privilege, really. I think the thing about being in the one place for a long time is getting to know people over a whole span of their lives, seeing things grow, seeing things change. So to me, it's been brilliant having been able to spend that many years with the same group of people in the same place. I count that a great privilege.
Yeah. And you are on the brink of retirement in the next few weeks due to your wife's ill health, and we'll talk about that a little bit later maybe. But I think I perhaps just wanted to start with asking you really how you became a Christian yourself, because obviously you're in Christian ministry, but there must have been a personal moment for you when you actually found faith. So perhaps just tell us about that.
The way I often express it is, for a lot of people, their Christian faith begins in their head. They learn it intellectually, then it moves, if you like, to their heart, and they begin to really appreciate it. To me, it went the other way around. It started in my heart because I was brought up in a totally Christian environment. My parents were missionaries in South America, in Bolivia. They worked there for almost 20 years, and I was born there, raised there. So a very, very Christian family where Christianity was everywhere, working with Christian churches. I went to a Christian missionary boarding school. So till I was about 13, everything around me was Christian. And in that sense, Christianity became part of my heart. I never had a reason to doubt it or to disagree with it. I saw it change people's lives. I saw the way my parents lived. So all of these things. So by the time I was an early teenager, Christianity was well rooted in my heart. For me, though, the test came when, as a family, we returned to the United Kingdom. Suddenly I found myself in a totally non-Christian environment. I don't know anybody almost in my class at school.
How old were you at that time?
I was 13.
13, wow, critical age as well.
It was, yes. None of them had any Christian faith. So now was the time when I had to really think, is this stuff that I've been brought up to believe, is it really true? Do I believe it for me? And over the next 2 or 3 years, that was what I established. Partly because I saw nothing in the lifestyle of my friends, whatever, that could ever compete with what I'd experienced myself. Intellectually, I found Christianity completely satisfying. There were no questions that made me think, oh no, this is untrue. So even though now I was the only Christian often, I just became more and more convinced of its truth. And so it was that kind of gradual development. So when I was about 15, I was baptized. That was my way of saying, I really do believe this. So that was my journey to faith, a gradual thing, but tested and confirmed. And I've never had reason to doubt its fundamental truthfulness ever since.
Yeah, thank you. And you got a job, you were working in industry.
Yeah.
And so at what point can you remember back when you started to think, actually Christian work might be the way for me, that I don't want to spend my whole life in secular work?
Well, I'd always thought that, actually. So the job I did in the computer industry for a while, I always knew was for a time, and that eventually my calling was in Christian work, partly just because of my upbringing. I loved mission work, I loved travel, I loved all of that. So my initial thoughts were that I would probably be a missionary of some sort. Then in my late teens, began to get involved in church work in this country, began to get involved in teaching the Bible in different capacities. Then began to realise that maybe my call was to pastoral work in this country, huge needy country as well. And so that's eventually what happened. So I always knew I'd be in Christian work of some sort. And eventually it developed into a desire to be in Christian pastoral work here in the UK.
You met Hayley as a teenager,
yes.
I believe, your wife.
Yeah.
Was she supportive of Christian work too? Was that something you felt was important that you did as a couple in your early marriage and so on? Did you discuss it? Yes,
that was probably the key thing, actually. If you're going to go into Christian ministry, whoever you marry must be entirely supportive of that. So when Hayley and I were just young teenagers, I remember specifically saying to her, look, if this relationship goes everywhere, you do realise that I might end up on the other side of the world or whatever. And
she said, yes, please.
Whether it was yes, please, she said yes. And she has certainly been just a brilliant support all the years. So she's not a Christian pastor's wife. She's just a Christian who happens to be married to a pastor, but is very, very supportive of him and his work.
Yeah, thank you. Looking back, it's often a time of reflection, isn't it, as someone steps out of their work they've done. What would you say have been the highs and the lows of your Christian ministry? Can you think of specific things maybe, or is it just an overriding feeling of what were the joys that you could celebrate?
Yeah, I mean, overwhelmingly, as I come to the stage I'm at now, it's with a great deal of joy, satisfaction. I'm sad to be stepping out of this work, but my experience it's also been 30 years, I guess, that I've been a pastor, has been overwhelmingly great. God has blessed me with 2 churches I've been in that have been wonderfully supportive and helpful. I said earlier, I've had a wonderfully supportive wife, and if I was to say anything to somebody starting off in ministry, if you're going to get married, number 1 rule is make sure that your spouse is entirely with you. That's absolutely key. She made me take my days off and my holidays, which again is another reason I've kept going for 30 years. Because a lot of us as pastors, we're guilt driven. We never feel we've done enough, and we always fill every spare moment, and we always think we're cheating people if we're not actually doing stuff. And so it's my wife who kept saying, this is your day off, this is a bank holiday, this is holiday, you take it.
Very important wives, aren't they?
Very important, very
people,
important.
Yeah.
So practical things. Yeah. But the highs have always been to do with people, seeing people grow and change and come to faith, and being encouraged by the faith of other people. Again, being in the same place for a long period of time means that there are people in the church that you will have seen born. You will have probably dedicated them, you will probably have baptized them, you may even go on to marry them. Same people, you see all of that, and that's a real privilege. So the highs are to do with the people. The challenges are also always to do with people, because the church is a messy place, isn't it? So you see people whose lives go wrong, you see people whose lives become sad, you see people that you have to deal with in ways that you do anything to avoid. And so both the highs and the lows are all to do with people, but Christian ministry is about people. It's about bringing people to faith in Christ, seeing them grow. It's not about institutions or programs, is it? It's just people. So the joys and the hard times are always to do with people in the end.
Now tell us a little bit about the place you're at now, because you've come to a place where you're going to retire, and quite early.
Yeah.
You're only a spring chicken at,
I am.
what, 57?
Something like that.
We'll call it 57. And so what brought you to that place, Colin,
Sure.
where you felt you were ready to retire?
Yeah. Well, it certainly wasn't something that I expected. But 2 or 3 years ago, my wife Hayley was diagnosed with a neurological condition, a rather swiftly deteriorating condition, and that has begun to affect her in all kinds of ways, her walking and her mobility skills, her speech, her energy levels, and so on. At first, I thought, well, we can do this and ministry at the same time, and then began to realise, well, I can adapt ministry a bit and still care for Hayley. And then I began to realise, well, maybe I need to go part-time and then care for Hayley. And then I sort of realised there's no such thing as part-time, really. And so decided that this would be the time to retire completely, to give my whole attention to caring for her. So it was a difficult, in one sense, a gradual decision, but in another sense, it's not been difficult, because I've never considered caring for my wife as a step down from Christian ministry. In the Bible, marriage is portrayed as something God has given us to display the gospel. And so if I'm caring for my wife, supporting her, I'm actually ministering, not from a pulpit now, it'll be in a different way, but caring for her is a high calling. I heard one minister put it, it's not something I have to do, he said, it's something I get to do. And I do feel that, though I know there's ups and downs, but I don't feel that something great has been snatched away from me to do something less. It's another kind of ministry that I value as highly. But I did realise it wasn't possible to care for her properly, to care for a growing church properly. The best thing was for me to do one thing, and that was to care for her. So at the end of this month, I'll be stepping down, which will be a very strange experience.
Yes, yeah, indeed. Picking up on that, you have preached yourself on the book of Job, which is a book about suffering.
Yeah.
This, I guess, was maybe the biggest time of suffering that you've experienced yourself and as a couple.
Yeah.
How did you find it when suddenly everything, I guess, that you'd preached for many years was suddenly hitting a place of reality, I guess, because you have to say, right, is my faith really standing in this? And and is everything I've preached about suffering going to be real in my life?
Yeah.
How did you find that, Colin?
Yeah, it was quite remarkable because I planned to preach on Job before this happened. I was just getting into this series when in the background we knew something pretty serious might be going on. So I had to preach all that in a very practical way, applying it to myself. I think I found my faith has not ever been challenged in the sense that I've never felt disappointed with God or disillusioned or thinking that somehow he's let me down, because I didn't become a Christian as a ticket to a happy life. I became a Christian because God in Jesus had forgiven my sins, and so it was my responsibility to live for him whatever he sent my way, and that could be good, that could be bad, knowing that actually ultimately it is good. There's a new creation, there's something in the future. So when God sent something like this into our situation, and I think I'd speak for Hayley as well, neither of us sat there thinking, oh dear, God has really let us down here. I think we just had to think, well, suffering is part of human existence, and there's going to be days, and there are days that are sad and difficult and hard, but never in the sense of, God, you've failed us. God doesn't owe us anything. He's given us more than we ever deserve. And if in our situation something bad happens, I guess sometimes you think the particular condition Hayley has affects about 1 in every 20,000 people.
Wow.
And so I sometimes think of being at Villa Park on a full Saturday, 40,000 people, and a hand comes down and picks out 2 people, says you're going to have an illness. And Hayley happened to be one of them. And so sometimes I think, wow. But then I think, well, there's all kinds of things going on in people's lives, and this is ours. And so what God then has, though, done is help us to strengthen faith, to trust him, I think, to learn to support each other, to learn the value of a church community, to go through this without a wide church community. We've got great family, both Hayley's and my own, loving and supportive. God's been good to us over the years so that we've got pensions we can draw on, things like this. So I think we look and think, it could be an awful lot worse. Now, I'm not trying to pretend there aren't some really dark days, but never in the sense of saying, God, you failed us. God, you shouldn't have let this happen, because we didn't buy into Christianity as a ticket to happiness. We bought in as a ticket to serving God, whatever honours him. But again, knowing that one day actually there's a new creation that we'll be part of.
And this could be perhaps one of the last public forums you have to talk. I know you're speaking at one of my coffee mornings on Thursday, and you're also, I'm sure, going to have more opportunities in the future as well to preach. But if there's one thing you'd like to say to people, to share with people who have maybe followed your ministry over many years.
I guess what I'd say is that over the 20, 30 years I've been ministering, it must be clear that the world really does not have answers to our situations. All the promises it makes about freedom and so on, over the last 20, 30 years, those have been proven to be more and more hollow. And so there's more and more reason to realise that there is a message that has lasted the millennia, that has brought hope to millions and billions of people, that continues to change lives. Surely it is becoming more and more clear that outside of Jesus Christ there is very little hope. So I would just say, think about it urgently again, and most of all think about the person of Jesus, because that's what it all comes down to. It isn't religion or philosophy in the end. It comes down to Jesus, who came and who lived and who died and was raised from the dead. And once you encounter him, all these other things become clear. So my appeal would be, look again at Jesus and turn to trust him as the only answer to your life.
Thank you. And Colin, we wish you well in your retirement.
Thank you.
And thank you for having a coffee with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you.